Gambia likely to lose 20% of revenue due to coronavirus pandemic. Africa calls for more UN support to bring lasting peace on the continent. The UN Refugee Agency is fast-tracking efforts to provide support to migrants in Greece. This and more coming your way on The World Today. This is Africa TV and many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in detail, and we begin with a latest update on the curfew from the Office of the Government Spokesperson. Now, Ibrahim G. Sankre, the spokesperson of the government of the Gambia, has told the state broadcaster GRTS this afternoon that the government has decided to relax the nighttime curfew effective tonight. So from that latest update, we move on because the President, Adama Barrow, has said that the Gambia is expected to lose an estimated $2.3 billion due to the decline in import duties and other tax revenues as a result of the pandemic. The Gambian leader was speaking at the National Assembly chambers during his fourth State of the Nation's address on Thursday. Juldinjai Suare has more details of that in this report.
The expected loss in revenue from import and tax represent 2.4% of the Gambia's gross domestic product. An initial analysis shows that the GDP growth rates for this year could decline from 6% to 2%, according to the Gambian leader.
Based on the current situation, an estimated 20% of expected revenue will be lost. The total estimated fiscal impact from the decline in import duties and other tax revenues is $2.3 billion. That is 2.4% of GDP. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs projects that the fiscal deficit will widen from 1.5% of GDP to 2.1% of GDP.
President Adama Barrow said his government had to resort to cuts and reallocation of funds from travel, training and workshops into much-needed areas as the coronavirus pandemic arrives in the Gambia.
Certain budgets line expenditures have been reallocated to the Ministry of Health for COVID-19 related expenditures. This decision has affected almost all ministries, departments and agencies. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs was forced to make further budget cuts in the face of declining revenue in recent months and the expected loss of revenue for the rest of the year.
With decline in revenues and the need to provide humanitarian assistance and support businesses during this period of economic downturn, Barrow said the government is faced with a challenging task in the coming months. The Gambia has been experiencing a slowdown of economic growth due to the reduction of economic activities as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the Gambian leader assured that no matter the impact, government has already devised post-pandemic plans to protect the lives and livelihoods of Gambians. For iAfrica News, I am Juldenjai Suare.
Gambia's economy adversely affected due to the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the President, Adama Barrow. And from the report, next we head to Libya because Libya has been torn by conflict since the ousting of former leader Mohamed Gaddafi in 2011. The country has been split into areas controlled by UN-backed Government of National Accord in Tripoli and Tripoli and territories held by the Benghazi-based Libyan National Army led by Khalifa Haftar. On Wednesday, the Prime Minister of the Government of National Accord, Fayez al-Sarraj, announced his resignation in a televised address. Omar Ahmad Fati tells us more of that.
His resignation speech, Fayez al-Sarraj, the head of Libya's presidential council, told the Libyan people that he will be handing over power to an executive authority, which will be formed no later than October. Sarraj said he was resigning as leader of a socially and politically polarized country.
The social and political milieu was and continues to be in a state of acute polarization and division, which made all attempts to reach peaceful solutions to prevent bloodbath and maintain our vulnerable social fabric very challenging. Some stubborn parties were and are insistent to deepen these political divisions, opting for war to achieve its illegal objectives. This is something we have realized at an earlier stage, so that we made many concessions to block the way for such sinful desires.
Ever since Gaddafi was toppled, Libyans have been involved in a civil war between forces of the internationally recognized government and Khalifa Haftar's rebel forces. Efforts to reach a peaceful agreement are compounded by the involvement of regional and international powers. The United Arab Emirates, Egypt and Russia are backing the Haftar's Libyan National Army, while Turkey is supporting the government of National Accord and have helped it repel a 14-month assault on Tripoli in June. Sarraj again.
When the war broke out to invade the capital and topple the legitimate civil authority, we fought back against a foreign-backed war machine and achieved victory. Thanks to God, our rebels and the brave army soldiers. In this context, we have to make clear that the government, since its formation, was not working in a normal environment, not even close to normal. Rather, it came under daily pressure, deceit and plots from inside and outside parties. Some even notably and repeatedly sought to disrupt the government. As a result, the government often faced great difficulties and obstacles, which prevented it from carrying out its duties in the most favorable way.
Oil-rich Libya was plunged into chaos when a NATO-backed rebel uprising in 2011 toppled and killed the country's longtime ruler, Muammar Gaddafi. Peace talks are expected to resume soon in Geneva, and the outgoing Prime Minister Sarraj have urged negotiators to quickly name a new administration to secure a peaceful and smooth transition. His resignation came amid protests over dire living conditions and corruption across the country. For iAfrica TV, I am Omar Ahmad Toure.
And from that report there on the Libyan crisis, now to the UN Refugee Agency said it was stepping efforts in support to respond to critical and immediate needs of migrants after the Moria Reception and Identification Center burned down last week. An estimated 11,000 asylum seekers are without adequate shelter on the Greek island of Lesbos. Details in this report by Ibrahim Kebi Sanko.
Greek authorities have identified another location on Lesbos Island to temporarily house the most vulnerable children, men and women who were made homeless in a series of blazes last week. At the request of the government, the UN Refugee Agency said it was assisting in the setup of a new temporarily tented facility to accommodate those at risk. UN body is also providing technical advice and sharing expertise regarding shared setup and planning. So far, they have provided 600 family tents, which are already accommodating some 700 as of yesterday evening. The agency also provided chemical toilets and hand washing stations and said it was ready to provide additional water, hygiene and sanitation support that may be required. To prevent and mitigate the spread of COVID-19, asylum seekers are undergoing rapid COVID-19 testing by the national health authorities before entering the new facility in cooperation with its partners. UN agency said it was also distributing cold relief items, including blankets, sleeping bags, mats, jerry cans, plastic seating, and hygiene items to cover the essential needs for up to 12,000 people. Since the 2015 migrant crisis, the number arriving on Greek island near Turkey have fallen considerably, but Greek camps remain overcrowded as those in Italy. Greece and Italy have accused wealthier northern nations in the EU of failing to share the burden, as irregular migration, including refugees from war zones, continue to seek a new life in Europe. For iAfrica TV, I am Ibrahima Kebi Sonko.
UN Refugee Agency to support migrants in Greece. And from the report, next to Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe's tourism industry is gradually returning to normalcy after months of closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government had imposed a lockdown as part of measures to cope the spread of the virus in the country. As the recovery process continues, the industry relies on local tourism while observing strict measures during operations. Here are more details of that in this report.
There's strict adherence to safety protocols as hotels welcome guests back. Room occupancy is still low, but conference business is picking up.
Here at Crystal Lodge, we've got Sango Conference Center. As we speak, the take-up is on 65%, which is encouraging, and we're looking forward to it getting to 100% in the next coming weeks.
The Cresta Group runs 5 hotels, including one in Victoria Falls, where most players are in the doldrums.
Some have opened up in recent weeks as domestic tourism has returned, but many have remained shut, particularly those that require higher rates for their services. You know, they're really reliant on the international market, and so really until international travelers return here, Victoria Falls will remain really quiet.
International airlines will be allowed to return in October, but no quick rebound is expected. It's going to be a long and complex road back, especially as the global industry still tries to work out things like visas, travel insurance, testing and quarantine protocols.
People will still think twice about traveling, be it short haul or long haul, as is the case for international travelers visiting Victoria Falls. We expect to see the more adventurous travelers, maybe single travelers and couples. You know, it's more tricky for multi-generational travelers to come and for big groups to travel.
Until then, there's a deliberate strategy to try to induce domestic tourism.
In order for us to allow this industry to reopen and to grow again, we need to make sure that the locals can access the facilities. And we have come up with a domestic-based pricing to allow the locals to be able to patronize our properties.
That will defer the industry's revenue targets.
So we are willing to wait for another 12 to 24 months in this recovery period. But by that time, our tourism economy on its own should be within the range of $2.5 to $3 billion, because we are targeting to get to $5 billion within a frame of maybe 2025, thereabout. That's our target.
Tourism, which had been earmarked as one of the key economic recovery drivers, is expected to contract by a staggering 7.4% on the back of the COVID-19 crisis.
Tourism industry gradually returning to normalcy in Zimbabwe. Now, a French court on Wednesday handed Lamin Jack, a former head of the International Association of Athletics Federation, IAAF, to a 4-year prison sentence. Jack, 87, was found guilty of taking bribes from athletes in return for arranging the cover-up of test results that enabled them to continue competing, including in the 2012 London Olympics. Ibrahima B. Shanko again reports.
The ruling included a 2-year suspended sentence and a fine of almost $600,000 after the former head of the World Athletics governing body was convicted of corruption on Wednesday. A French court heard how Jack solicited bribe up to $4.1 million from athletes suspected of drug cheating and paid off other officials at IAAF to assist with the cover-up. Jack's lawyers said they will appeal against the ruling and they have promised to keep him out of jail for now. He will remain under house arrest pending the appeal, which could last for months.
Cette décision est une décision qui est injuste.
We immediately inform you that Mr. Jack's defense will appeal this decision. This decision is unfair and inhuman. It is unfair because we saw that the court sought to be politically correct and wanted to use Mr. Jack as a scapegoat. By reading this decision, the court showed us that it only fully espoused the prosecution's thesis. No element presented by the defense was considered. All these of the prosecution were taken into account without any hindsight.
William Borden, one of Jack's defense lawyers, said the court was adamant to get a guilty verdict and that the defense team has presented enough assertion to exonerate the Senegalese man of any wrongdoing.
It is exceptional at this point in a judgment to systematically, so viciously, so massively dismiss all the inconsistencies, all the exculpatory elements to try to get a guilty verdict, which we will firmly appeal before the Court of Appeal. And it is neither the first nor the last time in the judicial history of this country, during major financial trials, that the Court of Appeals, months after an inhuman, iniquitous, and bewildering judgment, corrects things and reminds everyone what the law says.
The court also convicted Papa Massata, the son of Lami Jack, who fled France for Senegal after the investigation began, to 5 years in prison and imposed a €1 million fine on him. Lami Jack is a Senegalese businessman, sport administrator, and a former athlete. He was president of the International Association of Athletic Federations, IAAF, from 1999 to 2015 and a board member of International Olympic Committee, IOC. For iAfrica News, I am Ibrahima Kebi Songo.
He is set to appeal against the ruling. And we'll be right back. Welcome back, and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin on iAfrica TV. And now to the rest of the stories. Now, the West African Economy Bloc, ECOWAS, has renewed its call for a civilian transition in Mali after a meeting with the military junta in Ghana failed to yield a positive outcome. The Accra meeting, hosted by the ECOWAS chairperson Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, was expected to provide an opportunity for a breakthrough, but the parties couldn't reach an agreement. The bloc said sanctions imposed on Mali will be lifted when the military relinquishes power to a civilian leadership. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Last month failed to meet the deadline set by ECOWAS to select a civilian leader to head the transition. An agreement was not reached with the army junta to hand over to a civilian government, but ECOWAS leaders say their message is clear.
We have been able to reaffirm the positions of ECOWAS. We need a civilian leadership of the transition, and we've also made it clear that the minute that leadership is put in by ECOWAS.
Leaders have, however, agreed to a request from the army leader to consult with his team in Mali and then respond to their request within a week. 12 leaders out of the 15 ECOWAS countries, and there's been a tense at times. With no consensus reached at this ECOWAS meeting on hand leader, some experts say the situation in Mali could affect
some of these Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliated groups will take advantage of the confusion and establish stronger footholds in the area. The possibility that whatever is happening in Mali will spill over to other countries is extremely real, because we've had multiple reported cases of cross-border attacks from Mali into Niger, and it's been successful.
After the coup, ECOWAS sanctioned Mali by shutting all its borders to the country and also cut financial transfers. While ECOWAS leaders wait to hear from Mali's military leadership on their proposal, they've not said what further actions they will take if he does not agree to hand over power to a civilian government. But the regional bloc could apply tougher sanctions against Mali if the country fails to return to civilian rule.
In the world, which the UN is struggling to address. And this is despite the presence of over 10,000 UN troops in Mali alone. Experts say the UN needs to re-strategize and deepen its intervention efforts to bring lasting peace to the region.
It is really the question of calibrating the intervention to make it inclusive, to make it more effective, and then bringing some innovative ideas and creativity to make sure that wherever they go, they will be able to make an impact, make a difference by bringing about stability and peace.
The UN is currently running at least 7 peacekeeping operations across Africa and several humanitarian missions under the UN Refugee Agency.
I think Mali should be should seize the attention, and then how do they also support other stakeholders in West Africa to make sure that there is peace. There are election issues. The UN has a Department of Political Affairs and Peace and Security. They'll have to look at it. There are elections coming up in about 5 countries, in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, Burkina Faso, and in Niger. So there has to be, even though UN does not provide election observers, but there are other areas that they can assist.
The UN has a significant presence on the continent, and there's still more that can be done. But funding has been a big challenge in executing projects in Africa.
And from the report there on the political situation within the sub-African region, we come back home because when the Gambia reported its first case of the coronavirus in March, several emergency measures were taken by the Gambia government to halt its spread. These measures include the closure of all basic and secondary schools, and this has led to regrettable outcomes, according to Gambian President Adama Barrow. Details of that in this report by Aissatou Tamba.
During his 4th State of the Nation address at the National Assembly chambers on Thursday, President Adama Barrow said his government regrets that the national assessment exams for students in low grades could not be conducted this year due to the pandemic. More than 500,000 students were forced to stay at home and follow lessons on radios and TV stations. Despite this, President Barrow admitted that a significant time of contact hours with students have been lost.
These are the Gambia University of Science, Engineering and Technology Bill 2020, the National Accreditation and Quality Assurance Authority Bill 2020, the University of the Gambia Bill 2020, and the Gambia Institute for Public Administration and Management Bill 2020. These bills spell out arrangements to transform GTDI-MDI into degree awarding institution. Through the arrangements, a variety of new courses will be offered. We TVET accorded more attention to address the skills gap within the Gambian workforce. The respective schools of the Gambia College will be indexed into the University of the Gambia, and teachers will be trained from diploma to higher levels.
Announcing new plans, the President, together with the Ministry, is working to transform the higher education sector for the provision of high-quality education and training. In this regard, he said 4 new laws will be sent to the National Assembly for approval.
As we all know, schools were closed nationwide for months, which directly affected about 674,300 children. The loss of instructional hours arising from this threatens the attainment of the annual target of 880 hours of instruction time. We applaud the sector for intervening to keep the students at home and delivering lessons on radio, television, and other social media platforms. In particular, we commend the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, together with the Gambia Teachers Union and partners, for providing about 500 solar-powered transistor radio sets to deprived households in URR, CRR, LRR, and NBR. This has enabled children in those households to follow lessons delivered for them.
Through the arrangements, a variety of new courses will be offered, with technical and vocational training, accordant more attention to address the skill gap within the Gambian workforce. And the respective schools of the Gambia College will be indexed into the University of the Gambia, and teachers will be trained from diploma to higher levels. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Aissatou Tamba.
Let's stay home and now to matters of the National Assembly, because Section 115 of the draft constitution confers powers on the Gambian president to appoint members of his cabinet, the ministers. However, this appointment must be subjected to national approval. I'm afraid we may not be able to bring you the details of that story. And of course, with that, we bring this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, you can also log on to our website on iafrica.tv. Well, once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and bye for now.